Hello and welcome to the December NMSS tournament. This time we're playing with the formatting a bit. Instead of having the 6-ship pools and trying to aim for 3 pools and occasionally 4, what we're going to be doing instead this time is having a larger number of smaller pools, and instead of having a champion pool, there's going to be a champion bracket, double elimination bracket at the very end. I'm hoping that's going to change things up. It's certainly going to simplify things, because one of the things I can do is, in the event of a tie in a pool, I can just pass all the ties into the champion bracket and let it sort itself out there. But as is pretty standard protocol at this point, first up we have the neophyte pool. Most of these are second-time competitors, but in particular I'd like to welcome Pola to the NMSS arena. This is his first entry and a farmer submission, so good luck to Pola on that one. And yeah, there is very much so a Nico Ni. But let's go ahead and get this one rolling. Up first we have Miku Symphony up against Pola, and you can see Miku Symphony has brought 2 of these large, very fast missile kiters. They also have a few railguns on each of them. They're a little hard to see, but mainly protected by speed and shields. And on the other side we have Pola, who is making liberal use of the various farmer shields of several sizes, and looks like longbows if I remember right. This guy is using solar panels and med beams and seed planters. This feels like a campaign ship to me. I don't... Obviously the solar panels aren't going to help really at all. They're still cheap, but there is no resources in the tournament, so the solar panels and the factories here don't even apply. So there's a few wasted points here. This guy's a seed planter, but it will function as a distractor. I decided to leave it in because first time submission, a little more lenient on the rules. But I'm feeling like, unfortunately for Pola, I feel like Miku has every advantage here. As we can see, the missile is cutting through the shields very quickly. It's one of the reasons I don't recommend relying on shields. They're very vulnerable. And these missile alphas, once the shields go, it's just sensitive components, mostly reactors. But next up we have Tarabot up against Miku Symphony. I said pause. Tarabot is bringing a whole lot of these largely rectangular ships. These things are carrying a mixture of weaponry. You can see it's got some torpedoes on it, some plasma cannons, some lasers. The lasers are no doubt on point defense, but huge piles of armor on those guys. These little guys just have lasers, but again, big piles of armor. I feel like Tarabot is going to fare pretty well here. Those missiles are very good against soft targets, but not so great against durable ones. They are still cutting a hole through, but you can see the vast difference in kill speed. Even the smaller targets are taking quite a while for those missile ships to kill. However, as long as the AI behaves, Miku Symphony should still take this one, courtesy of the range advantage. But we've seen the AI do some pretty silly things in the past. And you can see these big guys are almost pinched one of Miku's ships. If the big guys manage to pinch one of the ships from Miku Symphony, it's probably not going to live longer than just a handful of seconds. But that said, sometimes getting a pinch like that is a pretty big ask. In the meantime though, on the top of the screen you can see Miku Symphony's ship doing exactly what it needs to. Staying back at range, just barraging with missiles and burrowing through. Not really sure why Tarabot's ship has decided that standing there is better than moving in, but that is the decision it made. But with Miko's ship, I don't know, Tarabot's ship is making some odd choices. I'm not sure what the AI's deduction there is. And I think we all do like a pretty good pinching flat base. It does look, though, with time running down and Miku having about a 400 point lead, I think we are going to see Miku take round 1 as the lead slowly accumulates. But this one is either probably going to consistently be Miku whittling away and winning on points in the long run, or ships spectacularly being destroyed very suddenly. As tends to be the nature of kiter fleets. Miku's ships are doing a really good job of behaving, though. I think a lot of that, compared to some of the kiters we see, these ones are actually fairly large. It takes 4 of the Terran shields to fully protect them instead of just 1, and I think that's helping them out rather much, or a rather large amount, because they can afford to lose some exterior components and still stay mobile and fast. And yeah, the smaller ships having just the 2 lasers will not break through one of the Terran shields, but most of Tarabot's fleet more than does enough damage to punch through the shields. It's just a matter of applying it, and that seems to be where Tarabot's fleet is struggling here. I think Tarabot was expecting more brawler-style enemies, which is a pretty fair assumption. Brawlers tend to be rather popular. And yeah, if the little ships had proton beams on them, I don't think Miku would have lasted this long. But at the same time, a proton beam is 15 times the cost of a laser. We almost did see a big pinch, yeah. But Miku's ship managed to escape. The missile barrages coming out of Miku's ships make it almost impossible for a direct torpedo volley to actually get anywhere, which is one of the things we're seeing in the bottom left right now. The torpedo volleys are moving toward Miku's ship, but between its agility, helping it move out of the way, and the constant barrage of missiles, the torpedoes are having a very difficult time actually connecting. Miku's ship's doing rather well so far. Definitely worth commendation. And next up we have Miku Symphony up against Nico Nico Ni. Nico Nico Ni is bringing these 2 designs, this one being a different style of missile kiter, but it's also bringing some torpedoes and plenty of point defense. Heavily overlapped shields, so if it does get hit by something with a large splash radius, it will cause some problems. This one is also somewhat kitery. It's largely using railguns and torpedoes, but you can see it's also carrying some proton swords, plasma mortars, defense cannons, kind of a smorgasbord of things, and it's got some frontal armor which will help it survive a bit longer in a direct fight. And right off the bat you can see the the armored ship dashing forward, which I think is both what Quan wanted and ideal. However, turning around to show its ass like that is not going to do it any favors, as the thinner rear armor just gets punched through. Quan's other ship, though, is so far behaving pretty well, and the burst lasers and speed holding up against the missiles, but Miku has every advantage right now, I believe. If nothing else, I think this is going to go to Miku on points. It just may take a bit. I think Quan's ship will do a very good job of sieging slower targets, but in this is kind of these kind of battles happen from time to time. They're just going to kind of dance around for the rest of the match. I could run my tourneys at 2x. The only problem is half the time they're, especially when brawlers are on the screen, the time dilation rule is already in effect. So running it at 2x won't actually do anything. Yeah, that's fair. I'll just call it on points. I don't think it's going to improve a whole lot. And with the way the last one went, this one is probably going to go similar, but I'll give it a second to actually let it play out. If Quan's larger ship manages to not reveal its butt, then Quan's fleet will handle pretty well. But Quan's armored ship is intended to kite, which means it'll probably turn its butt toward the Miku's ships whenever it goes to chase them, which is going to be a problem. Yeah, the AI will try to maneuver as quickly as it can. The only problem is it does so with no regard for where it's armored or how far it actually has to go. So if it has to chase an enemy that's just outside weapon range, instead of going forward, if it's a kiter, it'll turn around back toward the enemy and then try to turn around again to actually engage them. Which is kind of a silly problem to have, but it is one that we have. The point's staying a lot closer this time. As you can see, when they split off to a one-on-one fight, both fleets are rather evenly matched. But oh, there it is. Quan's fleet just stole it. The downside to building completely unarmored kiters is if the AI flubs for even a second or two, that can very much so be it. And with the number of railguns on Quan's ship, it's able to punch through all of the shields and start breaking components in one go. And it's a little difficult to see, but Miku Symphony's ships are held together in the core by reactors. So if you can get to any of them, the whole ship just explodes. And yeah, the butt ship doing much better this time around. The butt shark. And Quan takes round 2. So now here we are in round 3. As we saw before, this could go pretty much either way, but as long as Quan's armored ship doesn't reveal its ass to both enemies at the same time, it looks like Quan has the advantage here. Also, I've mentioned it before, but for anyone who's just watching for the first time, you'll see Quan has this little tail on the back of his ship. That serves two purposes. The first is that it shifts the center of mass of the ship, so you can help control it, which the center of mass is very important for maneuvering. The other thing that the tail does is it prevents the ship from getting stuck on the wall because the tail is pointed, so when it collides with the wall it'll immediately turn one way or the other, forcing the AI to do something. One of those situations where it's a pretty bad environment to begin with, but just about anything is better than nothing. And it's looking like Quan is going to be taking round 3 as well. I looked away for a second and one of Miku's ships was dead. So the butt ship is, it threw the first round just so that it could do a reverse sweep. Well done, butt ship. Well done. And next up we have Witness Your Effortless Destruction by Braided Headman up against Miku Symphony. You'll notice that Braided Headman has the shrug emote in his title, but the font doesn't load the face section, so it's just a square. But keeping with the theme of this being roughly 1 hour and basically no effort, Braided Headman decided to keep it. But there are two real designs in the fleet. There's the circular design, which has 2 proton beams and a smattering of other little weapons. It looks like he designed half of a ship and then mirrored it and called it a day. And then this guy is kind of the same thing, actually. He just designed like half a ship and mirrored it, which I like because it gives you the symmetry, but it also I really appreciate the idea of the whole fleet just being low effort, just meh. So let's see how this one goes. The proton beams historically have not been a very successful weapon. The AI has to focus to keep them up on the target. Statistically, they should be good. They've got good range, solid damage, but the AI never seems to use the proton beams all that well. But that said, if they do behave even kind of well, they'll smash the Miku ships pretty efficiently. The proton beams have a good bit longer range than most of the other beam weapons. Although the ships are having a hard time actually fighting as a unit. They're just kind of getting shredded. And for anyone who's not too terribly familiar, the Terran small shield regenerates 200 health per second. The proton beam, each one, deals 400 damage per second. So each of these ships would bring down a shield in just over a second and a half. And Braid was keeping up on points, but I think by now he's lost enough that he's going to have a hard time actually clawing it back the rest of the round. And yeah, that's another problem. Even when they do stay on target, the proton beams are they don't focus on single blocks. They kind of spread around the ship. But it does look like Miku Symphony will be taking round one. But now here we are in round 2, and you can see Miku's already off to a pretty strong start. The ships from Braided seem to be much better at retreating than advancing, which you kind of need with the proton beams, but it does create the effect of if the enemy gets in the middle, they kind of spread out, and in Miku's case, Miku ships are faster on the retreat than Braided ships are on the charge. So that's why they're kind of spread out like this. If Braided's ships were able to stick together, they'd probably be faring a little better, but at the same time, I don't place a lot of confidence in the proton beam in general. Yeah, I've been subtly challenging people to make it to the champion pool with farmers for quite some time. Let's see how that goes. There, kamikaze dialect. Talking about building a successful proton beam ship. Well, the other way to really look at it is if you compare the proton beams to the antimatter cannon, you can get 5 proton beams for the price of the antimatter cannon. The antimatter cannon has range and splash damage, but the 5 proton beams have, what, 8 times the DPS combined? Which, if you think about it like that, that's not half bad. That splash is nice. The proton or the antimatter cannon also has the advantage of not needing them to stay up on target 100% of the time to be useful. The antimatter cannon can kind of sweep across the target, fire, and then maneuver around and sweep again. And Duke might make it to champs. He, because of the smaller pools, he has a better chance than usual. But now we have Pola up against Tarabot. Unfortunately for Pola, I cannot see him winning this. His medic ship is decided to charge up onto the enemy pretty quickly, which, of course, doesn't bode well for it. The kiters, you can see, were doing a good job of keeping their distance up until the disrespect behavior took over with the smaller ships out of Tarabot's fleet. And those plasma cannons are just cutting through the farmer shields. Even with the tournament mod, shields are not able to deal with that kind of incoming firepower, with Tarabot taking round 1. And given the arrangement of ships and how round 1 went, I can't imagine round 2 is going to go too much different. And some of those farmer missiles, you can see the explosion radius on farmer missiles is pretty impressive. It's big enough to completely cover some of the smaller ships from Tarabot, but the larger ones had no issue. Next up we have Pola up against Quan, and again, I can't imagine this is going to go well for Pola. Quan's fleet we saw was very competitive with and similar in style to Miku Symphony's fleet, and Miku Symphony kinda just ran away with it. And it actually looks like I misread some of the weapons on Quan's kiter. It looks like it's actually using some rockets too. But now we have Pola up against Braided Headmen, and I feel like this is probably going to go Braided Headman's way as well. The missiles are solid, but the ships from Braided Headman are carrying a good chunk of point defense and are fairly mobile. And you can see the medic ship has gone down. And yeah, like I said earlier on, I'm pretty sure Pole's submission was just some ships that he grabbed from his campaign fleet. And in a campaign, I could see these working out very well. The medic ship helping, you could probably build quite a few of those medic ships for pretty cheap and use them to transfer resources to the factory ships, but the tournament environment where resources are off is a whole different matter. And Braided Headman takes the match. So next up we have Tarabot up against Quan. Now we saw Miku Symphony win against Tarabot on points, but I think Quan is probably better suited to sieging those larger ships. He's got a good bit more overall siege type weapons. He's got mainly the torpedoes. I really like torpedoes against basically everything that can get hit by torpedoes. All around just very solid weapons. You can see the missile kiter doing its job. The torpedo hits will have a pretty pronounced effect, but it looks like the missile ship is having a hard time actually tracking. However, the butt ship is cleaning up the smaller distractors pretty effectively. The armor on the front actually serving it very well, as it would normally be suiciding into the smaller distractors, but because of the armor, it manages to survive and generally deals enough damage to kill them. I am inclined to agree with chat though. The smaller distractors from Tarabot probably could use a bit more DPS. I think instead of the 2 lasers, I think I would have included 2 defense cannons, which have more range, more DPS, and take up less space and have less weight. Other than that, I think we're seeing a pretty solid submission from Tarabot. It's just having a hard time dealing with kiters. Also, I missed the hyperdrive. A certain little monster has awoken and is running around. Gotta make sure he's not getting into anything. Yeah, the butt ship has managed to get itself kind of pinched. It needs to disengage. And it disengaged. Or maybe it didn't. It did not disengage enough. Butt ship goes down, and that's pretty much going to seal it for Tarabot here in round 1. And I think we're about to see the butt ship die again. It is revealing a fragile angle to targets that like attacking fragile angles. Or it managed to escape. With kiters and the AI, it's pretty hard to tell sometimes, because sometimes they'll do exactly what you needed, and sometimes they will just kind of, you know, suicide into things. They are not easy to predict at all. Quan building up a pretty solid point lead though here in the beginning of the match. Or the beginning of the round. But as we did see last time, it can all change very quickly. The problem with fragile craft is, much like they can just be very inconsistent is the big problem. And yeah, Splinter's fleet is a pretty solid pun fleet. I'm fond of it. I hope it does well, but I can't get too confident because it's all just a bunch of very fragile kiters. Well, I don't even know if they're kiters necessarily. They're really only armed with burst lasers, so they're kind of just like suicide rushers. I'm pretty sure Tarabot would just clean up Splinter's fleet, but Quan would get murdered by it. And next up we have Tarabot up against Paydirt Headmen. I feel like Tarabot's going to have the advantage here. The proton beams only slightly outrange the plasma cannons, and certainly don't outrange the missiles and torpedoes. In the meantime, you can see the proton beams are having a difficult time dealing with these smaller distractors. I don't know that he's going to be able to deal with the larger ships. It may be a three-way tie for first, but fortunately with the format change, a three-way tie for first just means all three advance. There's no weird stuff, nothing complicated. Just send them all through. the slightly misshapen space brick. I can get behind the slightly misshapen space brick aesthetic. And Tarabot takes round 1. And I wouldn't be too surprised if round 2 goes basically the same. There has been a proton beam ship in the champion pool, if only because I know for a fact Holorser used them on one of his submissions, and it was one of the earlier tournaments. There might be others, but I know for a fact there's that one. And now we have Quan up against Braided Headmen, which could go either way. Like I said before, it all depends on how well Braided Headman's fleet clusters together. Though, much like against Miko Symphony, we could see Braided Headman's fleet just get kind of spread out, which would be a huge problem for it. And yeah, we're seeing a pretty big point lead out of Quan here. I'm thinking very shortly round 1 will go in his favor. Quan's burst laser is proving pretty effective against Braided Headman ships as well. Braided Headman's fleet has a lot of shields and mobility, but what armor he does have is relatively thin, and thin armor is kind of the specialty of the burst laser. And Quan takes round 1. This is the first pool, Tarabot. The neophyte pool. Let's see. Where are you at, Kamikaze? Kamikaze, you're in the 4th pool. And Splinter, you are also in the 4th pool. And it's looking like we're going to see Quan take this one on points here momentarily. Or, maybe on kills, but either way. What did you say, Duke? I didn't see the message. There are 5 pools. 5, 5, 5, 4, 4. And Quan takes the match. And with that, Quan, Tarabot, and Miku Symphony are all advancing to the champion bracket. Tarabot, and there we go. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.